I'm just going to have to say it. Jim Harbaugh is by far the most overrated coach in college football. I don't mean to hate on Jim, and I am rooting for him to succeed at Michigan, but let's just be honest with ourselves, and when it comes to competing for championships, winning big games, and just living up to the prestige, Jim Harbaugh doesn't exactly live up to expectations. What is up, guys? Today we're going to be taking a deeper dive into the Jim Harbaugh era at Michigan and why I think he is the most overrated coach in college football. Disclaimer, when I say overrated, I'm talking about when it comes to competing for conference titles and the college football playoff, because going 9-3 every year is something that most schools can only dream of. But before we get started, please take a moment to subscribe if you love college football, like the video if you want to support the channel, drop a comment, and turn on post notifications so you don't ever miss out when I upload. Now let's go ahead and get started and talk about Jim Harbaugh. The Wolverines have not won a Big Ten championship since 2004, and they've had 3 coaches since then. First, they were under Rich Rodriguez for 3 years, and the team went 3-9, 5-7, and 7-6 before he was fired in favor of up-and-coming head coach Brady Hoke. The Hoke era started out fabulous as they went 11-2 with wins over Ohio State and Virginia Tech in the Sugar Bowl, but unfortunately it only regressed from there as they went 8-5, 7-6, and then 5-7 before Hoke was fired. After that, everyone knew who was going to be the next coach of Michigan, and it was Jim Harbaugh. He was hired, and the fan base could not have been more excited, but let's first go back in time and try to understand how Harbaugh got to this point and why people were so excited about the hire. Jim Harbaugh actually grew up in Ann Arbor as his father was an assistant coach for the Wolverines, and when it came time to pick a college, Jim chose to play for Michigan. Once he was given the chance to start, he became one of the best quarterbacks in program history as he led them to the Rose Bowl and finished 3rd in the Heisman Trophy voting. From there, he was drafted in the first round and went on to start for the Bears and the Colts before he won Comeback Player of the Year and would retire after 14 seasons. From there, Harbaugh began his coaching career as a quarterbacks coach for the Oakland Raiders before he returned to the college level and became the head coach at the University of San Diego. While there, he led them to 2 straight conference titles and was actually so good that he was hired by Stanford to be their new head coach. The Cardinal had struggled the previous years, and Jim was expected to come in and change everything. They were correct, as in his first year, he coached the Cardinal to beat number 1 USC in a game they were expected to lose by 41 points. After going 4-8 and 2-7 in his first 2 years, Jim and Andrew Luck led them to an 8-5 and 11-1 records, including a win in the Orange Bowl. After becoming one of the best coaches in college, Harbaugh was hired by the 49ers. He revitalized Alex Smith's career and led them to a 13-3 record before they lost in the NFC Championship game. In his second year, the team went 11-4-1 and lost to his brother John's Ravens team in the Super Bowl. From there, they made one more return to the AFC Championship before he missed the playoff and was ready for something new. Jim Harbaugh returned to his alma mater, and the hype was unreal for Michigan football. Now we're going to talk about the Jim Harbaugh era and why he is an overrated coach. When Harbaugh came in, he immediately changed everything about the staff and had to try and salvage the 2015 class. They brought in the number 37 class in the country, which only had 6 4-star recruits. Jim's first big game was a Week 1 road game with Utah, a team that would end up winning 10 games, and on a huge stage, the Wolverines fell short, and his record in big games was 0-1. Now we get to that first moment that has defined the Harbaugh era. The number 12 Wolverines were set to face rival number 7 Michigan State, and everything was going according to plan until it was time to punt with a few seconds remaining. In one of the most heartbreaking ways I can think to lose a game, their punter bobbled the snap, and Michigan State's Jalen Watts-Jackson picked up the ball and scored a touchdown with no time remaining. This makes Harbaugh 0-2 in big-time matchups. Harbaugh's teams consistently played down to their competition as they beat Minnesota after a goal line stand and also took 2 overtimes and a miracle 4th down game-tying touchdown for them to beat a below-average Indiana team. Both those games honestly could have gone down as losses, but in the end, he survived. They did beat Penn State, but the Nittany Lions finished 7-6 that year, and now Harbaugh was set up for his first date with the rival down south, Ohio State. In what has become a yearly occurrence now, Ohio State killed the Wolverines, and his big game record was 0-3. Jim finally made a statement as they ended up going 10-3 and they'd kill Florida in the Citrus Bowl, and he got his first statement win. Yes, they did win games against Northwestern and BYU. Going into 2016, the Wolverines brought in a much better recruiting class, which was headlined by Rashawn Gary and quarterback Brandon Peters. Wilton Spate was the new quarterback, and it actually looked like Harbaugh was going to take the next step in only his second year. They ended up destroying Penn State, a team that would go on to go 11-3 and win the Big Ten East, and then they won a defensive battle at number 8 Wisconsin. That brings Harbaugh's big game record to 3-3. Now things began to fall apart though. The Wolverines were caught sleepwalking the entire game against Iowa, and it came back to bite them as they lost by way of a last-second field goal. They were still playoff contenders though, and all they had to do was beat Ohio State and win the Big Ten championship game. In one of the best games this decade, Michigan lost a controversial double overtime thriller to the Buckeyes, and then went on to lose to number 10 Florida State in the Orange Bowl. Despite starting out 8-0, the Wolverines finished at 10-3, and Harbaugh's big game record was now 3-6. Going into 2017, the Wolverines brought in the number 5 class, and after Wilton Speight battled injury, the team was forced to play John O'Corn and Brandon Peters at quarterback. Harbaugh once again started out the season strong, this time with a win over number 17 Florida. I don't know how many times they played them. A few weeks later, they lost to a Michigan State team that won 10 games, and then had to take Indiana to overtime to win. After getting killed by number 2 Penn State, Harbaugh's big game record is now 4-8. After that, Michigan got killed by Wisconsin, lost to Ohio State for the 3rd straight year, and then lost to South Carolina in the Outback Bowl, bringing his big game record to 4-11 after an 8-5 season. I do cut him some slack because of the injury to Wilton Speight, but the talent was still there, and it's not like their backup quarterbacks were terrible. Going into 2018, the Wolverines brought in the number 22 class and landed former number 1 overall quarterback recruit Shea Patterson as a transfer from Ole Miss. Michigan began the season on college football's biggest stage against number 12 Notre Dame, and they lost. From there, they beat number 15 Wisconsin and number 14 Penn State, and honestly looked like they could make the playoff. Their redemption tour took them to Columbus, Ohio, as they proceeded to suffer one of the worst losses in school history to Ohio State once again. Their playoff dreams were over, their Big Ten championship dreams were over, and Harbaugh was now 0-4 against Ohio State. Michigan played number 10 Florida, and they got absolutely smacked around by the Gators. That was a Florida team that, in my opinion, was not even that good. Another once promising season went down the drain, more talent was seemingly wasted, and Harbaugh's record was now 6-14 in big games. Going into 2019, the Wolverines once again brought in another good recruiting class and a senior quarterback calling the plays. This was now Harbaugh's 5th year at the helm, and his seat was starting to get kind of warm. Things did not start out on a high note, as running back Chris Evans was suspended for the year. They brought in the best class in the Big Ten, proving that kids still wanted to play for Harbaugh, but when was he going to take that next step? People thought 2019 was finally going to be the year, and they were not only picked to finish first in the Big Ten East, but were also supposed to win the Big Ten championship and make it all the way to the college football playoff. They would win their first game, but then things became very concerning when it took them 2 overtimes to beat Army at home. They won, and then they proceeded to get destroyed by Wisconsin once again. They beat number 14 Iowa, and they were sitting at a 5-1 record going into their primetime matchup with Penn State. Wide receiver Ronnie Bell dropped a game-tying touchdown, and they would end up losing. From there, they redeemed themselves with a dominating win over number 8 Notre Dame, but it was once again time for the annual Ohio State beatdown. Things followed the usual script, and they got killed by Ohio State again. They had a chance to beat a Tua Tagovailoa-less Alabama team, but they got killed in the Citrus Bowl. After this current season, Harbaugh's record in big games is 8-18. Now we get into 2020, the most scrutinized Jim Harbaugh year. It was going to be a 2-man quarterback battle between 4-star recruits Joe Milton and Dylan McCaffrey. Luckily for Joe, Dylan entered the transfer portal and was basically given the starting job. They had a very talented running back room with Hassan Haskins, Zach Charbonnet, Chris Evans, and highly touted freshman Blake Corum, but none of those guys would really perform. They'd have to replace Donovan Peoples-Jones, Tariq Black, and Nico Collins at wide receiver, as none of those guys would end up suiting up for Michigan. And they didn't really have a lot of options to step up. They did have the number 14 class in the country, which was headlined by 4-star wide receiver A.J. Henning, so he was an option, plus they had Mike Sandersville, Ronnie Bell, Cornelius Johnson, Giles Jackson, and Roman Wilson, and to be honest, they never got a ton of production out of any of those players. On defense, they had Cam McGrone, Kwity Paye, and Daxton Hill as stars, but the 2020 Wolverines did not live up to the hype. They beat Minnesota in their first game, and all of a sudden Michigan was on fire, and Joe Milton was called the next Cam Newton. But as we all know, the hype immediately fell off, as the very next week they lost to first-year head coach Mel Tucker and quarterback Rocky Lombardi's Michigan State Spartans, who had just lost to Rutgers at home the previous week. Because of that, they dropped in the polls, but the bleeding did not stop, as they lost on the road to an Indiana team that ended up being really good. At 1-2, they needed a big comeback. They suffered their worst loss of the season the next week to Wisconsin, and all of a sudden things were not looking good for Jim. They avoided disaster against Rutgers, as they would have to take them to triple overtime to win, but then in the battle of the tanking Blue Bloods, Penn State won at the Big House for the final game, and Michigan would finish at 2-4. They missed their last 3 games with cancellations, and the miserable season finally ended for Jim Harbaugh. Many truly thought he would be fired, but it was announced that the Michigan man would be extended instead of let go. You can toss the blame around everywhere for the 2020 mess, but at the end of the day, it's on the head coach. He will likely get one more chance in 2021, and he will have a lot to do. They have 3 quarterbacks in the mix with J.J. McCarthy, Cade McNamara, and Texas Tech transfer Alan Bowman, and I think all 3 have a legit shot to win. They have Hassan Haskins returning, but with Zach Charbonnet leading for UCLA, they need to find another guy to step up at running back, and many will look to Blake Corum or true freshman Donovan Edwards to fill that void. They'll need to find a go-to wide receiver as well, and the defense has a lot of holes to fill, so I think Jim will really have his work cut out for him going into this do-or-die year. To be honest, I don't think he really played in any big games in 2020, so his record will still stand at 8-18. How on earth can a coach at a school like Michigan lose 18 big games in 5 years and go 0-5 versus their arch rival and expect to have a job? I honestly don't know. At this point, Michigan football has become a complete joke amongst the media and the college football world. Winning 9 to 10 games a year is cool and all, but with the consistent top-tier recruiting classes, grade A facilities, and constant exposure, how does the team continually underachieve every single year? Well, it seems like it could be the coach. It honestly seems like Ryan Day has the potential to be better than Urban Meyer, and it looks like the Buckeyes are recruiting even better now. Plus, Penn State is going to continue to be better and better, and they'll have a bounce-back year. So realistically, can we ever expect Michigan to win the Big Ten East? Let alone beat Ohio State? I don't know. Let's just look at the Big Ten over the last 5 years to gauge what teams have done equal or more with us, or more with less talent. For one, Wisconsin constantly wins 10 games a year, and they rarely even get top 25 classes. Northwestern has won 10 games twice over the last 5 years, and was in the Big Ten Championship this year, and they recruit even worse than Wisconsin. Iowa, Minnesota, and even Nebraska have won 9 or 10 games these past few seasons, and Purdue has even beat Ohio State more times than Jim. Indiana is building something special with Tom Allen at the helm, and Maryland looks to be on the uptick under Mike Locksley, and then you can't forget that Greg Schiano seems to be doing big things at Rutgers, and Mel Tucker's doing better than people expect at Michigan State. I could potentially go on for hours about what teams do more with less, but that's just a waste of our time. After they lost to Ohio State in 2019, I really thought Harbaugh deserved to be fired, and especially after 2020, I thought there was no way he would return. Unless Michigan wants to continue losing big games and hurt their brand image even more, then I think it's time to replace him. Coaches such as Chris Klieman, Luke Fickell, Matt Campbell, Jamie Chadwell, and even Jeff Brom would likely do as good or potentially better with the kind of talent Michigan has, but it's safe to say the university is afraid to move on from Jim because he's an alum and brings in top-tier classes. Why did the school not pull the plug and fire him? I can't answer that question, and you'll have to ask the Michigan athletic director himself, but all I know is that, in my opinion, there is not a college football coach that disappoints year in and year out more than Michigan's Jim Harbaugh. I know today's video is a bit controversial, and it definitely slams Michigan, but I do want to see Michigan football do well. I like a lot of their players, and I think Jim Harbaugh is a great guy, but we also cannot deny the facts. I'd love to know your opinion on today's video, and let me know if you think Jim will survive this year, how Michigan will do, and if you think I hit the nail on the head with today's video. I'd love to hear your argument in the comments section, and I'd also love to hear a suggestion for another video I could do next. Before you go, be sure to give the video a like so it gets in the algorithm and more people can see today's video. Hit that subscribe button if you love college football, and check out all my other videos on the end screen, including my video about grading Michigan quarterbacks. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.